Mistress, Second City, the many faces. What the hell? Maybe I do realize why people don't come to libraries. What makes a marriage last? Okay, I'm in the wrong section. This dude is racking in cake. The whole section is James Patterson. Holy James, what the hell? The Clockwork Universe, Isaac Newton, the Royal Society, and the Birth of the Modern World. Okay. Infinity.
So this next song is called I Miss That Feeling. I wrote this for an NPR arts podcast called Arts and Letters. And it's a really interesting show where they'll contact a musician and they mail you a book that you have no idea what it will be. And then you write 6 songs about the themes and plot of the book. And then they interview the author and kind of intertwine the songs into a podcast. So it's a really interesting project that I've done maybe 5 of now.
They put my tunes on the bar game. I think first do it all for my last name. And to think I thought having drive was a car chase. We've all been there, got the trousers and the t-shirt. Saying life's a bitch, I'm just screaming, have you seen her? She put lipstick on my collar, tried to take me to the cleaners. If you just get your pre-up, you won't never need a prenup. If you love them, then they'll love you back. But if you bun them, then they'll bun you back. Try and strike, then they'll thunderclap. Feeling like you're hit by lightning, baby mother trap. Asking you for pee every week, what kind of love is that? So everywhere I go, I bring my team with me. You're trying to be some rock boys, we're trying to P Diddy. Money makes the world go round, just trying to spin, spin, spin. Me and Scraps killed this, and I'm at the injustice. Let them free my bros, that be a win, win, win. To the Lord we toast, just trying to cleanse our sins. Yeah, yeah.
Trying to make it to the top, and I ain't never gonna stop for everyone that don't believe in me. All my niggas locked up, keep your heads held high. Every day we be praying for your freedom, G.
The only one I fear is God, and I don't never walk alone, so it's like I brought the priest with me. Everything I seen's been a dream to me.
And that's where everywhere I go, I bring the team with me. And that's where everywhere I go, I bring the team with me.
I'm on chapter 41 and I'm so close to finishing the book, but it's just like, yo, I don't know, bro. I don't know if it's memory overload or my brain knows that it's just like near to the finish line, so it's just slowing down, but it's just like, This book is becoming a drag at certain points. But we gotta finish though. We gotta finish. Will I do another video like this? Probably not for a long time. No, bro. Like, it just takes so much time, and I'd rather put out. I want to put out quality stuff, but I also don't want to get caught up in 4 days of reading with no editing. You know, it's just not time proficient. So, now we just gotta get locked in.
I brought the wrong pen. No way, bomba clot. That's crazy that chapter 8 talks about the discovery of calculus, and by chapter 50, we're still talking about the discovery of calculus, bro. So basically, the first 8 chapters that we read is kind of introducing like the setting of, you know, what's going on within the scientific world. We learn like what the Royal Society is. Well, not really like technically what it is, but they mention it. It's just a group of virtuosos who come together and, you know, discuss, debate about whatever their findings are. And it's also introducing, just like we learned a lot about just the Great Fire of 1666, which kind of left 100,000 people homeless. We also are learning about the time of plague, so it kind of sets the stage for the book in general. And when I was first reading it, I thought the book was kind of like, the book in the beginning especially was all over the place. We're talking about philosophers, then we're talking about plague, then we're talking about just like the government. So when I was first reading it, I felt like it was a slower read because I couldn't really focus on, all right, what's this book about? It kind of condenses later on, and you'll see that when I go through some of the chapters. But okay, we have chapter 9. Scientific advancement outpaced thought. The inventions of tools like the microscope uncover worlds unimaginable, life in the smallest drops. Okay, so basically, during this chapter, a lot of scientific advancement was made, whether it be from the technological side, from, you know, the ability to see the smallest of life through microscopes, to also those findings kind of reproduced in a scientific form and how that supported math and what people believed the world to be. The microscope led to a reconstruction of what people believed the world to be, because now you had people going into pond water and looking at water with the naked eye and seeing nothing within the water, but then put under a microscope, that water now produces thousands of small, insignificant, you could say, life forms that just live, coexist with humans, and has never been seen before. Now I'm remembering that if you remember what I talked about before, actually I don't even know if I got to this part of the book. Anyway, during that time, one of the key pieces of evidence used for any testimony, I think I actually talked about this during 1666 when they talked about the Great Fire, was eyewitness testimonials. So if someone said they saw this, the naked eye was absolute, and whatever someone saw was to be 100% trusted. And what the microscope brought during this chapter was, or just information against, that the eye is absolute. When these samples are done, you also question, all right, what about what's inside of a tree, what's inside of grass, what's inside of the air that we breathe and, you know, speak into? Because now I've seen life within a pond that I've never seen before, and that could technically apply to all life. So they kind of talk about that. And I mean, what did I write here? Life in a small drop, nothing was deemed impossible when it came to predicting results of experiment. All right, and that too. So to the average person, that was their outlook of life. But to virtuosos and scientists and philosophers of that time, it changed their approach of how they basically expected the experiment to go. So before, if I'm throwing a pen in the air and I'm, seeing how high it goes, I'm obviously going to expect it to come down. And because of the invention of the microscope and its discoveries being quote unquote unbelievable, you now, as a scientist, had to enter experiments without bias of what were to happen, because things were so unbelievable and so remarkable at this time of discovery that if you were to not acknowledge it, or if you were to not acknowledge that your experiment can bring about results that were unfathomable, then you would not be able to present the information in a journalized form as a scientist would at that time. If I'm a scientist, I'm not going to write in my notes, oh my God, and I couldn't believe it, I can't even speak words and describe what I saw. Like, as a scientist, you're not supposed to be tapped in
too much into your emotional side. Obviously tapped in with God during this time and then tapped in what you see in your results. So it kind of changed their approaches on experiment results. Like, I'm not going to expect too much of what could happen because I know unbelievable stuff can happen. So that was a little change on how virtuosos approached, scientific experiments. And this also goes into, this chapter goes into a little bit about Newton's 500,000 words of alchemy and how philosophers, I want to find another word for journalized notes, how they wrote down their notes on their research, on their studies, on their experiments. They encoded with inside terminology. Labels had either been sacred to openly, what? Have been sacred? Okay, well, I mean, Jesus Christ. It's getting to the point where I can't even read my own notes. Holy shit, I'm like one of these virtuosos. Anyway, Newton's 500 words of alchemy, 500,000 words of alchemy, encoded with inside terminology because he deemed that the information be too powerful for the average person or the average citizen of London. What were they to do with the information, and also to what were other philosophers were to do with his information as well. So not only did he take away some of this information from the public, but it also protected his notes and research in the sense of security, because other philosophers may have looked at his work and discovered something maybe before he did. And it was, philosophy at that time was competitive. If you're an intellectualist, intellectuals play a game of chess. To be deemed smarter as someone, to crack the code before someone else could, would demoralize them. Because in a video game, nowadays, like, with the internet, it kind of seemed like we kind of accept that someone might find something before us because just subjects of all matters are just so open sourced. But back then, when you're dealing with a smaller pool of people in your niche and the amount of time it takes to crack a certain code, for example, let's just say an Easter egg in a video game. Sometimes, some Easter eggs take years to find, but for the most part, most of these discoveries take, maybe several months. Someone finds a glitch in a game, they find this, they find that, because now it's just so many people online playing a game. But back then, if you had a niche of, let's just say, 30 people within your town and you're all trying to figure out one thing, and those things took 3 to 5 years of constant research and debating with your peers and colleagues and trying to prove something that didn't exist or may have existed, and symbolizing it to geometry and putting that in and seeing if this works, yada, 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 and putting all this time and effort into something that may take the 3 to 5 years to code, including everything I just said, and then having someone else just erase all that work because they found and cracked the code first would obviously, make sense for them to write their research in, encoded forms. But yeah, so basically a little thing on chapter 9 wasn't too crazy. I should have brought some water. It's gonna be a rough one. I'm in the sun. I'm only on chapter 10, and my mouth is dry. And I'm in Florida. Yeah, I'm in Florida. This is smart. This is smart. Chapter 10, the Boys Club, the struggle of New Thought, the Royal Society's motto, Nullius in Verba. Bro, I read Nullius in Verba so many times and wrote it down that I kind of just know it now. It's basically like, just don't take anyone's word for it, find out for yourself. The New Age Club discarded that ideology. This motto went directly against the grain of older virtuosos. Older virtuosos had held the testimony of what I witnessed to the highest regard. Yeah, so this goes back into chapter 9 of the microscope, showing worlds unforeseen and never seen before. Because of that, it changed their psychology on how they approach experiments and how they approach science. So the Royal Society came up with the motto of Nullius in Verba, which is don't take anyone's word for it. Is that it for chapter 10? Okay, chapter 10 does go into a lot more. There's a whole page on it. Okay. Older virtuosos believe one who would deny such would be gullible or an unsophisticated. Okay, so that statement right there also led me into a loophole. And they also quoted that it was a hallmark of the narrow-minded and suspicious peasant trapped in the bubble of his limited experience. Remember, they didn't have the internet during this time. Imagine a dude from Africa went to the Netherlands, and instead of the dude coming to, the Netherlands to Africa, the dude from Africa went to the Netherlands and he told his friend, yo, we have these giant dogs that legs are 6 foot in the air with a body about the size of a wagon, and its neck is about another 10 feet. That is kind of crazy, but I guess the mind of a peasant couldn't comprehend that. Okay, so that was the motto then. The motto wasn't necessarily seeing something with your own eyes. It was believing, another person's eyewitness testimonial. And yeah, no, I mean, now that was kind of thrown out the window because now we know the naked eye and everything. We also learned in this chapter that rash experiments were taking place. So I don't know what type of bullshit they were on, but we have sheep to man blood transfusion. The man ended up living, and this was a time when they didn't know the difference between blood types. So yeah, shout out to bro, because he lived. A man pumped air inside another living man's arm, and I guess his arm got black and blue, and he ended up living. Pumped air into I forgot about this. They pumped air into a chicken. The chicken died. I don't know if it died because it popped, but the chicken died. And one thing they actually couldn't kill was they tried to inflate a snake. They claimed that the snake would simply not die. Yo, this is like a little kid just destroying and torturing animals. Jesus Christ. Actually, they go into that later. I mean, actually, we talked about this before when they were in the plague. When the plague was at its peak, they didn't know what it was causing the plague, so they threw animals and killed animals on the street. So yeah, animals at this time weren't seen also as things that could feel the same pain that humans felt. So that's why it was lack of animal rights during that time as well. Okay, so now we're on chapter 11, to the barricades. The Royal Society set out to change the openness of discovery. Most philosophers pre-Royal Society had often kept their discoveries in secrecy. The society understood the publication. Okay, so now we're getting into the publication, so I can go back to this when we talk about Newton's encoding when it came to his research. Now, all the things that I've said supporting on why he did that still held true in the world of virtuosos, but one thing that trumped all was the exponential gain towards advancement in their research. And although you still have the cons of, another person may be finding something out that you wanted to find out, it was all personal matter. And in the holistic view of science, if they were to publicize all their findings, it only would lead to more people being intrigued into researching what the world was about. And if more people were researching what the world was about, then that would mean more minds working to crack a code, which would essentially cut the time it took to crack a code. Not because smarter people would come in, but the discussions of people would advance, meaning that little pieces needed to unlock a key were being, transferred at an exponentially growing rate compared to what it was before if they kept if the Royal Society kept secret about their findings. So chapter 12 talks about dogs and rascals. Publicity turned hateful, with the New Age sharing such discoveries to the public. Those who discovered / solved something first gained all media praise. Although there was a trump card of, yes, exponential gain, that exponential gain in science also caused exponential hate. Bro, people were hating on each other, man. They was mad jealous. It was mad jealous, bro. Ain't no glaze, bro. There was no glaze during that time. Nobody was like, yo, this man. I mean, there was low-key glaze in Newton. There was low-key glaze in Newton. That's later in the book, though, because he does do some crazy shit. But most of the time, it was like, yo, this pussy-ass nigga done discovered some shit before me. That's what it was about, bro. Like, they now, instead of people, discussing about this and that and, friendly debate about information, now it was about, oh, I found this first and you wouldn't have found this. That's what it turned into. So, yeah, I mean, they made advancement, and the theory that they had before worked. Just brought hate too. A quote from a virtuoso, I didn't write the name down, but it is not enough to succeed, others must fail. They was really hating on this time. Hella, bro, they was hating mad. Chapter 13, a dose of poison. This chapter dove through a niche of mutilation, curious towards anatomy, often using animals for cross-species subjected blood transfusions. Yeah, I forgot about this too. Normalized to the public so much that the king himself would partake in gutting human bodies from dead and imprisoned. Yeah, so for example, like I said before, the lack of animal rights during this time, one of the inventions created was the cat piano. The cat piano. What would possibly be the cat piano? So pretend you have a piano. The piano would still have keys. and instead of playing musical sounds, it would play the sounds of cats. But how would it play the sound of cats? Now, each of the keys in front of me would be tied to a string, which would then have a nail at the end of it, or some sort of contraption that would basically move a nail downward. And in front of this nail would be a cat. So if I had 5 keys, I would have 5 cats in front of each key, and I would have the nail right behind the cat. Now, what does a nail have to do with a cat and, a piano? Well, I'll tell you this, we would have to torture the cat to make music. Yeah, sadly, yeah. I know that kind of sucks, but this is what they did back in the day. So they would make songs with meows, and each meow, oh my God. And not only were the cats lined up behind nails that would poke their tails, they were lined up in formation of tones. So if you had a cat with a deep voice, I guess you could tune your piano to whatever formation fits your play style of music. So if I'm the pianist, now I have my keys, I have my cats, I got the deep voice cat, I got the high pitched one, and I'll play it in front of crowds. As they kept pressing the nails into the cats would scream louder and louder. And that would usually be the best part of the song or the symphony that they would make. And that's basically the cat piano, which was stabbing cats that would meow in the form of music. Now we have chapter 14 of Mice and Men. So because I told you I haven't read a book in a long time, I also haven't taken proper notes in a long time as well. And what I mean by that is when I would search up something, let's just say I was editing Premiere Pro and I needed to find some sort of tool that would maybe make a visual, like a visual that I wanted to have in my video, then I would just go watch a video about it, take a couple notes, or have a reference, tab right here, and then have my Premiere Pro right here, and then I would just copy information from here to here, and then here to here, and I would never truly break it down. So now that I'm reading a book, and it doesn't have to do necessarily with some sort of functioning tool, or like the information that I'm learning doesn't necessarily have to do with like some sort of action that I have to do in real life, and it just has to do with information and how I process it. Now I have to change the way I take notes. So my notes started off as bullets, and it was pretty basic. Like you would look and be like, all right, I mean, this man just copied facts. Like that's what his notes were. So some chapters just like, it took me a long time to even write notes because I'm like, this chapter didn't even go into facts or details that advanced the storyline of this time period. And because of that, I'm like, what's another way that I could jot down notes? And it would be to give my opinion on what the chapter meant. The same way the author gives his opinion on maybe a discovery that a virtuoso made. So not only did I gain new information with this book, I also kind of refreshed my gears when it came to taking notes and how to change formats when needed based on the information given. So chapter 14 of Mice of Men, I view this chapter as a point of stagnation. New worlds are being discovered by both everyday people as well as virtuosos. These discoveries, however, have led to no real world advancement. Okay, I remember this now. Besides entertainment, some families argue that the trend of science is a waste of money and time. Fathers of households are seen spending fortunes of time and equity just to look at worms. Perspective quoted from the young daughter of a royal. So I actually remember the price. So the price quoted of a microscope during that time was $2,000. How much that equates to now, who knows? But you gotta drop some cash for a microscope during that time. This also led to virtuosos questioning themselves. I think it comes into further chapters, but I'm gonna just talk about it now. So now you have, these new worlds being discovered, but in reality, who cares if there's life in a pond when it doesn't change my life in general? You get what I'm saying? So now, like, how do you justify this research? And also, how do you justify the funding of this research? Especially if you're not a virtuoso and you're a father just wanting a new toys for his family when it's really expensive and you could have just got something else. Now the Royal Society would go on a question like, how do we apply this to real life? And then they would go into other routes of science. But yeah, so that's basically what this chapter is talking about. Stagnation, we're making this, we're seeing this, we're doing blood transfusions on sheep and humans, which is cool, I guess, and we see what happens, but it's not real advancement to everyday life, and it's not helping really anything. Now we have chapter 15, a play without an audience. Advancement equals too stunning. The lack of public morale behind the pushing questions of the New Age philosophers came from the lack of need. Why destroy common sense to Why destroy common sense to find an answer, to find a new answer to an old solved question? They felt that it was doing more bad than good, also on an education level. Why teach people all these? It was like memory overload. Like, why have all this information when it didn't change or advance the? That's like telling a kid who wants to be an engineer that Premiere Pro doesn't allow you to have speed ramp and warp stabilizer on the same clip unless you nest it. You get what I'm saying? So people were like, why would you tell, kids these pieces of like all this information and educate them on, oh, that's a beautiful looking sun? Why would you educate? That was a crazy tangent, but you can't see it, but the rays look crazy. All right, hold on. Let me see if I can get it on the camera, but I'm gonna talk to you anyway. So but the public was like, why teach people this information when it doesn't even aid general life in any real way? Yeah, nah, you see the rays up there though? You see the rays? Yo, I'm telling you, bro, that look beautiful. That look beautiful. But yeah, nah, they was like, what the fuck you teaching my kids? You not teaching them nothing. Stop the funding. Give me food. That's what probably the peasants were saying. I'm not going to lie. All right, now we got to go back to the table, man. We got the raise. Was the B-roll even that good? Was it worth it? Was it worth it? Was it worth it? Galileo didn't give a fuck about them little kids or the masses. He was like, fuck all that, I'm gonna get back on the Greeks. So Galileo felt that the Greeks had been too cautious with their use of math. Many virtuosos such as Galileo regarded math as a form of art. Not only did it fail or did it fall in the category of creative work, but they felt that formulas matched the beauty of symphonies. Aristotle, so it goes into Aristotle, questioned why things happen. Galileo as how the public did not see math in that light. Yeah, so this just goes into the differing opinions of scientists and masses of that time. Chapter 16, All in Pieces, the Confusion of Stars. The name All in Pieces fit perfectly for this chapter as a new age comes and testifies against some of the greatest mysteries regarding our solar system. All in pieces. So you have Copernicus, the first to vocalize the theory of spinning, moving, basically the spinning, moving spherical top that we call Earth. Galileo favored the sun-centered universe. Ptolemy devised an Earth-centered theory of the solar, led to mathematical jumble of odd paths. Ptolemy, whatever his name is, his theory was accepted the most at that time. Chapter 17, never seen until this moment. The man, the myth, the legend, Galileo. Yeah, okay. So during this time, there was not a lot of glaze, obviously, because of the hate of finding something first and just the high competitiveness, the high stakes of what it meant to find something. So, I mean, people weren't really, glazing Galileo, but the reason why I put the note sometimes I would make my own chapter titles and be like the man, the myth, the legend Galileo was because the author was glazing Galileo. The author glazes certain people, and we'll get into that later. I mean, obviously he has to focus on certain prominent figures, but obviously we in 2025, the nigga was glazing crazy. He was glazing Galileo, he was glazing Newton for sure. Newton was on the top of his Johnny, and then he also glazed Kepler a bit. Leibniz, Gottfried, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Gottfried is crazy. And then Galileo was probably like top 3 glaze fest in this book. Anyway, so the telescope. This chapter talks about how he created a telescope using long paper tube and curved glass principles from glasses, allowed the discovery in the cosmos of 2 new stars and 4 moons surrounding Jupiter, lets a visual representation of orbit, which had only been mathematically explained through formulas, brought enlightenment to the public as well as fear and uncertainty, thus challenging the Earth being the center of the solar system. So this discovery it was basically as big as the microscope, but now instead of focusing on the inner infinities of nature, you're now focusing on the outer infinities of nature. So obviously you have the inward zoom, what's at the smallest levels of life, and then what's at the biggest levels of life. So then it questioned the Earth-centered universe, which was widely accepted, thus supporting the statement of it brought fear and uncertainty to the public. Because now, as a regular person, you see this research, because now research is in media, You see it being presented, and it's like you have to question life at that point. Okay, and then he was clever. Galileo was clever in the way that he delivered his research to the public. So first, he would go to the government or the royals, whoever ran the government at the time. He would use the telescope for military advancement. Military advancement as in, you're on the battlefield and now you could scout at a whole another level. If you were to send a spy in, it'd be a physical specimen. You would have to have a human go to the other side of, a town and then stay there and then report back, and it's all this mumbo jumbo just to get the most basic of information. That was Galileo's introduction to the government. It was like, yo, we focus your invention, bro. Like, yo, let's do some dope shit. Let's fund your research, and let's get your name out there, man. I'm gonna vouch for you. I'm gonna give you the cosign. So that's the way Galileo went about, the telescope and his reputation, I guess. Chapter 18, files as big as a lamb, microscope. Examine objects. Yeah, so now this kind of goes into the microscope again and other objects that they viewed. So some of the objects that they viewed was fly, plaque on teeth, pond water, and last but not least, sperm. Basically, like when they viewed, especially like flies or any small living animal, it aided to the fact that God was the perfect mathematician. He made everything with perfection. Anything that was man-made during that time, if you were to look under, that was another thing too. When they viewed man-made things under a microscope, okay, all you would see under the microscope with man-made objects was human imperfection and simple geometry. That's what you would see. But when you viewed things such as a fly, you would view all this complex geometry to the point where there was hair on its legs. Its legs had joints. The eyes were in the form of hexes. Its body was like made of so many different layers in terms of its shell, its wings, and it was just so detailed to whatever man could make when viewed under a microscope. So yeah, so it just aided to the fact that God was supreme in his creation. Now on to chapter 19, we have from earth. Yeah, yo, if you see me sitting sideways like that, it's because this chair is uncomfortable, bro. This is a little aesthetic table, but this shit uncomfortable. From earthworms to angels, chapter 19. From earthworms to angels, the belief of God in science. The findings under the microscope upheld the notion that God was, okay, so I talked about this a little early. The greatest mathematician to exist, the belief that God created was what we see with the discovery of coexisting infinities led virtuosos to never question this ideology. The system can't accommodate you. Okay, that goes into what I'm about to say. All right, so also I kind of wrote down questions. One thing that slightly bothers me, however, is why did the Royal Society never question God? Was the Bible unchallenged? Why did they apply their motto of nullius in verba to all, but not God? Even now, as I write these notes, I find a disconnection from society. I'm outside the Colosseum. Now I have a new okay, and then during this, literally from sentence to sentence, I said, now I have a new understanding of why philosophers protected / encoded their notes. It was not to be ridiculed / banished and killed by the thought of the masses. The masses will make effort to show hostility towards non-conformity. The system can accommodate you. All right. So to break that all down, I broke it down in what I said. But the reason that those questions arose from what I was reading was because if we go back to the motto of the Royal Society, which was nullius in verba, don't take anyone's word for it. A lot of the time with these discoveries, the book at this time didn't make the mathematical connection to certain things. Scientists and virtuosos would make discovery and then they would just throw it and be like, yo, that's God. They never asked the how yet. Later in the book, they asked the how, but at this time, I was just like, why did you not want to go deeper? But I was just like, the reason those questions popped up was because I was just too early in the book to see the information presented later and how they approach certain things. But yeah, during this time, though, I felt like they could have questioned a little bit more and not thrown everything up to just, yo, this is God. It's just perfect because of God. Chapter 20, the parade of the horribles. The arguing views of nature, Darwin's theory of evolution, a simplified view of the coming of life, disregarded God. Newton could not accept the theory without God. For in the Bible, the universe was only created 6,000 years ago, thus not leaving enough room for the theory of evolution to complete itself in the past tense. Now, literally a chapter after, you have other virtuosos now making up theories that make sense in this physical plane of Earth, but in this biblical setting of God, it doesn't make sense. So now we're starting to see conflict of, all right, we look at Darwin's theory of evolution. I mean, this checks out. The microscope findings of, smaller forms of life, less complicated, checks out. They evolved this. They could, eventually lead to this. It all checks out. But now you're canceling a fact because it doesn't necessarily relate to God and the Bible. And that is the only reason you have to not believe in this theory. So, I mean, virtuosos at this time, later when we get into Isaac Newton's talk of gravity, then, that's way later in the chapters, but then it talks about, well, it doesn't talk about, it leads more doors open to virtuosos questioning God. But at this point, this is some of the new stuff that's coming up in the world where without God, theories are valid. Okay, so chapter 21, Shuddering Before the Beautiful, Enter Mathematical Alice in Wonderland. This chapter further engraves the idea of philosophers pedestalizing mathematical phenomena as art. You describe light refractions and other phenomena, describing behaviors of nature in detail. Yeah, no, I think that was just a boring chapter. It was like describing how Newton picked up a prism and how he would view light, and then how one of his theories to, I think, white light is made by all colors. It was like this weird, it was just like, and then it would go into like how kids would play with prisms. It wasn't anything too informational. Okay, actually this was, though, I didn't peep this quote from Giancarlo Rota. He was a mathematician. Of all escapes from reality, mathematics is the most successful ever. All other escapes, sex, drugs, hobbies, whatever, are ephemeral by comparison. Ephemeral, the concept of things being transitory, existing only briefly. Now going back into a couple of chapters ago, how I talked about how virtuosos held their discoveries and just their work to such a high regard. This is just a straight primary source quote of how high they held their regards. I just thought about this too. If I were to discover something, not only does it make the last 3 years of my research valid, it also has the chance to become an infinite, like eternal fact. Chapter 22, Proof Beyond Doubt. That was the motto of the Greeks regarding their seeking of discovery. Recognize unchangeable patterns, formulate theorems based on the consistent patterns of life. No pattern that is dependent on a variable was to be translated, not from ill cognitive ability, but rather juxtaposition of X to constant. So, with the naked eye being one of the highest prioritized forms of tools used to make testimonials, why would I, as a Greek whose motto is proof beyond doubt, use science that is not even present in the visible world to explain my world? Their motto basically held them back from maybe discovering things such as calculus, not because they were lacking the cognitive ability to find those things, but yeah, it was just their philosophy. Chapter 23, God's strange cryptography, discovered or invented math. Okay, so that was a big debate, or not a big debate as well, but that was the debate that I was talking about. I'll definitely say that math was invented. Like the quote says, you don't trip over a 3. So I view math as a language to represent and describe nature. The same way, if a tree were to be 500 feet tall, you don't see 500 engraved on a tree. You don't see, if there's a flurry of waves coming on top of the water, a number representing the amount of waves that are about to come. It's just a language at the end of the day. I mean, I don't have to explain it any further. Chapter 24, The Secret Plan. Newton had a claim he stood on the shoulders of giants. Enter Kepler. Okay, so this is where Kepler starts getting glazed. Yeah, no, so Kepler was cool because he believed he figured out a sun-centered universe, and when it goes into Kepler's backstory, he was just a man who was just kind of all over the place. But when it came to his theory of a sun-centered universe and how he applied geometry to the orbits of the planets, then he kind of leveled up into space. He felt as if God, who made a perfect universe, may have used geometry to make that perfect universe. So then he figured out that if you were to draw a circle and then put a triangle within that circle that would fit snug, whatever shape that the triangle had to be, then you could put another circle within the triangle and maybe put a square within that circle within the triangle, and then so on and so forth with other different shapes, such as like a pentagon. And then he would go on to continue and say that maybe this has to be the orbit of the planets. Now we have chapter 25, Tears of Joy. When he was doing these drawings, it was 2-dimensional. And when he did these 2-dimensional drawings and he planted these orbits based on whatever mathematical problems that he tried to solve to represent his theory. The math basically just it wasn't working out. He remembered in his head that the universe isn't some two-dimensional space, it's a third-dimensional space. So how about we take those drawings that I had that were two-dimensional in terms of shapes, and let's make them third-dimensional version of themselves. And it looked really cool. I wish I could draw it. Maybe I put a picture up. Eli put a picture up since I'm the one editing this. Mathematical errors had led Kepler to continue his quest in the geometry of orbit. Understanding the universe exists in third dimension form, he changed his slopes from 2D to 3D. Although wrong again, his research and published book brought forth recognition to his name. Yeah, so his research and mathematical attempts, well, he didn't know that his 5 platonic solid showing of his theory was wrong at the time. And that his book was essentially wrong at the time, but everything looked so good that other virtuosos was like, yo, for the time being, like, this makes sense. They didn't question it for the time being, but like, it just made sense at that time. And that little blip of like recognition, that's how he leveled up. And then goes into chapter 26, Walrus with the Golden Nose. So because of this, when he published his book and he had his theories of what the universe looked like in terms of the solar system and its orbit, he would meet a virtuoso called Tycho Brahe. Whatever, I'm telling you, bro, I'm butchering these names, but we're just gonna call him Tycho. He met a virtuoso called Tycho. Now, Tycho was maybe not as creative as when it came to theories such as like Kepler's, like when it came to combining shapes and making orbits out of it. He wasn't that creative, but the book claims that he was a known and recognized and reputable astronomer who was also rich and deemed as very fruitful, I guess you could say, or very talented and gifted when it came to measurements. And then we'll talk about measurements later, but why the title of this chapter is called Walrus with the Golden Nose is because he fought in a duel, lost a chunk of his nose, and replaced it with gold and silver. Yeah, nah, he was just him. He drank heavily and lived in riches. He lived in a castle, he had state-of-the-art research equipment, and he had running water. Kepler sent his Platonic science-related books to Tycho. Intrigued by the study, Tycho had brought Kepler to his estate for the role of assistant. Both had completely opposite personalities, which began to show as the relationship progressed. Tycho had wanted Kepler to assist on the research of his hybrid model. His hybrid model was basically that Tycho's hybrid model was something along the lines of the planet's dead orbit around the sun, but that whole orbit was similar to Kepler's, but Earth still was at the center of the universe, so it's like a hybrid model. We didn't really get too much into that because my boy Tycho was he was far off the ball on that one. But Tycho was known for his great measurements in mathematics, and that'll come later on. But Tycho death. Damn, that's it? That's all I wrote on this? Yeah, so Kepler would basically level up. He would go to Tycho's crib. He would have state-of-the-art research of, whatever Tycho gave him, and then he had state-of-the-art tools to expand upon his research and theories with. So here, I guess you could say the chapter ends on Tycho's death. Tycho would die. I honestly don't specifically remember how, but Kepler would now have full access. Remember I said before that because of their... Okay, let's go back to personalities. I didn't talk about this before, but Tycho was like a Chad virtuoso in my opinion. He was a Chad, bro. Like he fought duels, bro. Like, instead of like just like having like a gush on his face, he replaced part of his nose with gold and silver. He was rich, bro. He enjoyed drinking and going out. So, he was a Chad virtuoso. Kepler, on the other hand, was just like this. I think he was short too. He grew up sick as a child. He was like I said, he was a teacher, bro. He didn't have a heavy bag. He was just like a nerd. And so because of that, and because of the goals of their research, their personalities and their intellectual goals just didn't match, and that would have bitterness in their relationship. So because of that bitterness, Tycho would hold documents that may have aided Kepler back from him. I don't think they were in secret, but it was like, he had his own stash of documents that he would basically lock. I would assume, because it says here after Tycho's death that Kepler would use this opportunity to seize the documents that Tycho previously withheld. So I guess Kepler knew where the documents was at, but Tycho just kind of held it. He was like, don't fuck with these documents. That's what he basically said. Am I recording? But yeah, so his family wanted those documents too. But Kepler was like, fuck that, bro. I'm gonna take these. Yeah, I'm recording. Kepler was like, fuck that, bro. I'm gonna take these. I'm gonna take these. So that's what Kepler was on, bro. Kepler was like, yeah, I'm gonna take these documents. So that was the rise of Kepler. That was an interesting read. Well, actually, I don't know if there's much more on Kepler, but that's what I talked about. This was like 4 chapters of Kepler, which was like a cool. The book got into certain patches where it made sense. Remember in the beginning, I'm talking about it was so chaotic. Now we're getting into characters, their upbringing, and how they rose to fame and got reputable, and then their theories and why it didn't work. So this was definitely an easier read for me when I got to this point in the book, I would have to say. Yo, my jaw hurts from talking so much. Maybe this is part of my look smacking journey. Chapter 27, Cracking the Cosmic Safe. This chapter kind of goes into, even after after what I said about Kepler getting these documents. So even after obtaining Tycho's documents, Kepler couldn't figure out the mathematical root of errors behind his Platonic solids theory. Instead of disregarding the notes, he trusted the measurements of Tycho and abandoned his famous theory. So that's what I'm like. That's why I emphasized before when I talked about Tycho. Like, he was held to such a high regard that the theory that made Kepler famous and got him all this recognition, and the theory that he spent years in the making to create, he threw it away because he trusted he trusted Tycho's measurements that much. So that's why before I just wanted to talk about Tycho and his measurements. He eventually figured out after looking at Tycho's work that the planets traveled not in circles but ellipses. Allowed for the understanding that a planet's distance from the sun isn't constant throughout orbit. Understood that the planets somehow move faster near the sun. Essentially opened the door to the discovery of gravity. Yeah, so Kepler, this is why I said before too, or why I noted down that Newton, I don't know if I talked about it, but it was in my notes that Newton acknowledged Kepler because Kepler was on the path to discovering gravity. So Kepler would basically come up with 3 laws. Law 1, ellipses. Law 2, area is constant, and then area is constant throughout orbit. And then law 3, which is time is proportionate to radius, which is P times P equals K times D times D times D. P equals years it takes for a planet to orbit the sun. The variable K is equal to that of a constant, and D equals the mean distance from the sun. So the only reason that ellipses weren't taken in as like, okay, this makes sense, was because, like I said, God created a perfect universe, and perfection at a shallow level to the naked eye would be circles are more appealing than ellipses. Why would God make ellipses or not use circles in the creation of the universe? So that was kind of like a little bit of a resistance from the masses and other virtuosos, because it didn't make sense for God to use ellipses. But yeah, like I said, Kepler was a dog. Chapter 28, the view from the crow's nest. Does the earth move? Yeah, nah. So my boy Galileo was going for blood here. This is the question Galileo sought after. Analogies to prove we can't tell. So, okay. Galileo, during this time, went on this whole rant throughout the world, I guess you could say. I don't know how far he traveled, but he would go from place to place and basically say that we could not tell if the earth was moving or not. And then obviously it would be like, yo, like what the hell do you mean the earth is not moving, bro? Like, if the earth was moving, we would feel it, right? We would feel it. I mean, that would make sense if I'm, you know, when I'm let's see, what's a good thing here? If I'm riding on the back of a camel, obviously it's moving and I'm gonna feel it in some sort of sense. So why would I not feel the earth move? Like, it didn't make sense. Obviously, people don't understand the magnitude of masses and like you not feeling something. So this is kind of like some of the first analogies brought up by Galileo when it came to debating that topic of whether the earth moves or not. So he would go to like have like simple shows of if you were moving in a train and you were one of its passengers and the train had the smoothest tracks that it could ever like ride on, basically, then you wouldn't be able to tell that the train was moving if you couldn't look out the window. The same would go for Earth in a sense. So Galileo just went on a whole rant people didn't really fuck with him either. They was like, yo, this dude, dumbass nigga. I think that's what the book was talking about when it came to the masses. Like, people were still weary of like, I don't know, it sounds iffy. So yeah, that was chapter 28, bro. Galileo was going crazy. Chapter 29, Sputnik in orbit, another step towards uncovering gravity. So here I have something mathematical. Galileo discovered this concept and led Newton to question about what would happen to the rate of y above the atmosphere. Okay, so Galileo with those experiments explained the motion of like things traveling along the x-axis. So the boat thing, why the rock fell straight down, and the train thing, why you couldn't feel the train moving was because you were moving in parallel momentum with the train on the x-axis. But then he would start to go on the y-axis of motion and kind of discover that things would fall at a constant rate. So if you were to shoot a bullet and then you were to drop a bullet from the same height that the gun shot the bullet from, then he would notice, or he would theorize, I don't know if he actually did the experiment, but he would theorize based on like other similar experiments as well, that if you were to shoot the bullet, no matter how far it travels across the Earth horizontally on the x-axis, that it would still take the same amount of time to fall to the ground that it would take for the bullet that wasn't shot to fall on the ground when it came to the motion or the rate of motion on the y-axis. So if it took 2 seconds to drop a bullet from here to the floor, then it would take 2 seconds for the bullet to fall when it was shot from a gun. Chapter 30, hidden in plain sight, Galileo's discovery. All objects, regardless of their rate, fall exactly at the same rate. Yeah, so I basically explained that with the gun. This is how Galileo approached the universe. In order to, and this is how math works technically when it comes to constants. Like, you don't make certain theorems with exceptions to the rule. Like, I don't make, if I was a mathematician, I don't make a theorem based on every single variable that could exist. You know, I don't make a theorem about water if Godzilla was real. Then I have to change that theorem to accommodate for Godzilla. Like, I don't do that. So the way Galileo approached his experiments and his like whatever law that he would make was to strip the earth that he lived on to the bare bones. But when you're dealing with like dropping an anvil and a feather from the skyscraper, you're dealing with air resistance. But to Galileo, air resistance didn't matter because it was just like an unforeseen variable that the earth provided. So before you get to the variable parts of your math, you have you first have to before you get to that variables part, you got to get under the variables part, scroll, like thrash it. You got to get to the bare bones, and that's what he did when he came up with that constant rate concept. So 31, 2 rocks and a rope, replacing creativity with sensors. Galileo, the rocks are just dots in the universe tracing a trajectory. How? Aristotle, why did the rocks fall? How much? Okay, so this chapter 31, now that Galileo's becoming prominent and he's becoming talked about, it goes back to just the difference between Galileo and Aristotle that I talked about. You know, none really too crazy. That was like a pretty chill chapter. Yeah, like certain chapters, like I didn't really write much notes on. Like I just drew a rock and a rope. And yeah, no, that's it. 32. A fly on the wall, Descartes. I don't know how to pronounce his name either, but he's talked about pretty frequently within this book as well. But Descartes would create the graph, a bonding point between algebra, and it was significant because it was a bonding point between just, you know, all forms of math. It could be, now math can be just visually seen, whether it be from, it birthed the common use of charts we see today. So the same way you may see a rate of change of laws of motion to, or I mean, you want to see a stock, you want to see what a stock did over time. If you see a shape like this, and the John keep going up, then you understand the behaviors of a stock without having to look at mathematics and looking at a bunch of theorems and points, trying to visualize and conceptualize something that could be plotted on a graph, and boom, automatically just give you a visualization of what math means in terms of geometry. But Descartes, chapter 32, he came up with the graph. Chapter 33, new worldview is what I would call it. This chapter continues to dive into the clash of real worldview versus abstraction. Aristotle's view would support for studying what life is. Why create a theorem based on the absence of real world variables? What I talked about when it came to... All right, so yeah, I was giving you guys... I think I said this before, like they would talk about this in the book, and chapter 33 kind of goes into this. And Galileo's view of abstraction argued that in order to find the real world, you must make sense of the blank world. Chapter 34, Here Be Monsters. Okay, Here Be Monsters. All right, this is kind of interesting. Here Be Monsters, Don't Touch Infinity. So Zeno, 4050 BC. Yeah, this is something that stood out to me too. I just like this story that Zeno made. So Zeno was a Greek philosopher who spoke in stories. He was kind of just, I guess you could say, acknowledged known around the time of 4050 BC. His story of infinity. A man standing in his room. His goal is to walk to the far side of the room. The man must first reach the halfway point of the room. Then he must travel half the remaining distance of the room, and so on. The trip across the room would essentially take an infinity. Find a mistake in my reasoning. That right there, like had just so much impact on the timeline of mathematics and what mathematics meant. If the Greeks had taken his story a little more serious, or his stories a little more serious, then they may have stumbled across calculus in the concept of limits earlier. But I feel as if because his stories were connected to visual things that were deemed impossible, but possible in a theoretical sense, that it caused the Greeks to view it as paradox and be scared and just and abolish all of Zeno's just theorems. The Greeks couldn't necessarily figure out a mistake in his reasoning was because they were not open-minded to the inner infinities of life. Remember, the microscope wasn't a thing during the time of the Greeks. So I would say the world society is more open-minded to inner infinities when it comes to life you can't see with the naked eye. But Zeno was talking about numbers that were basically, 0.00000000001 when it comes to dividing, something by half an infinite amount of times when it came to time and seconds. So yeah, I feel as if that the Greeks may have not just caught the concept of inner infinities, and they threw it away a little bit too quick. Yeah, and because they threw it away a little bit too quick, it delayed maybe the discovery of or the invention of calculus, rather. Yeah, no, that's how I view Zeno's story, bro. Zeno's story was cold, bro. He was cold. I gotta read more Zeno stories, bro. I definitely gotta do that, but I felt like that story was cold because I also compare Zeno's story to, this was when I was younger too, and I didn't take calculus, just common theory of limits. So I remember I had a Beats case for my Beats headphones, and I had a toy Dodge Viper, and then I tried to get the toy Dodge Viper as close as I could to the case of my Beats, and I was technically thinking in a mathematical form. All right, if I can get it an inch closer, and then if I can get it as close as a centimeter, and then what if I got it as close as a half a centimeter, and then I'm like, isn't that technically infinity? Because I'm not saying that this is some crazy concept that I thought of, but I'm just relating it to the concept of limits and how Zeno presented his story. So when I'm visualizing the numbers in an augmented reality type of sense, I'm plotting these numbers just around the walls of my room, and I'm understanding that the centimeters can technically go on forever, and there's an infinite amount of numbers I could use to get closer to this case. So instead of me trying to get this car as close to the case, I just put it down, and I understood that it was it was infinite. There was no point in doing something that would take forever, which is it literally applies to Zeno. It literally applies directly to Zeno's story. Now we go to chapter 35, barricaded against the beast, motion, speed, and infinity. Although infinity still seemed a hard concept to grasp, it still kept sneaking its way into motion. For speed, to measure it as accurately as possible would be to measure distance traveled in the shortest intervals as possible. How much distance was covered on horseback in 1 minute, 1 second to, an instant. Chapter 36, out of the whirlpool. How would you find speed at a given instant? Zeno's paradox within the measurement. Yeah, so with the measurement, method speed looking to be found, Zeno's story seem less. Yeah, so this chapter goes into virtuosos all right, I mean, I understand that the intervals have to be as small as possible to have an accurate measurement of speed, but they just couldn't wrap their heads around the concept, and now like they look back at certain people like Zeno, and then they're like, maybe Zeno wasn't as bad as we thought, or the Greeks made him out to be, you know, because it technically makes sense here. And now we're into part 3 of the book, which is Into the Light. All right, part 3, Into the Light, chapter 37. All men are created equal. Lincoln would mark this as Lincoln would mark this as a goal not to be completed, but to always be chased after, as he understood that the statement was nothing but a distant dream. The distance, however, would fuel an ever-running machine chugging towards the notion. This goal can be described as a limit, relatively similar to that of Zeno's stories, infinitely close but never achieving. Virtuosos would now understand the concept of a limit, but had yet to figure out how to properly apply this concept to questions such as true speed. In math, we have now discovered what limits are, and this is kind of a tangent that the author, I guess, put on, but he would describe that, you know, Abraham Lincoln used the limit as a law to create a future. Well, okay, the notion of all men created equal would mean that all men should be, you know, treated in an equal sense, because he knew that that was technically impossible. It basically made the government adjust to whatever the times presented themselves with, and I guess providing aid and treating the people of the United States of America as fairly as possible to whatever demographic applied to whatever was closest to 100% of all men living in, you know, the U.S. So that was chapter 37 and chapter 38. now, God damn, there's 53 chapters, and then chapter 38 starts to go into Newton, and we kind of like stick with Newton pretty much all the way to chapter like 52. So yeah, now we're on the train of Newton Glaze. So Newton Glaze, we have the miracle years, which was 1665 to 1667, and within that time frame, he invented the method of tangents, the method of fluxions, I would assume it's pronounced, inverse method of fluxions, theory of colors, and integration. So to create all these methods, people deemed it as too quick, too revealing. Not only did the masses know of Newton's genius, Newton had also known his place in mathematics. Here's a quote: "Age is, of course, a fever chill that every physicist..." Oh, okay. So, yeah. So that goes into and during the time of the miracle years, Newton was about 23. During this time, I guess philosophers viewed the window the same way how athletic window is not from 0 to 60. You get what I'm saying? Like that's not the prime of a male body, and the prime would be, you know, from 18 to like 28. But in terms of the mind of a physicist, as a scientist, you know, it was viewed from this quote as age is, of course, a fever chill that. Okay, let me read it. Let me read it in with some respect. You know, respectfully read this. Age is, of course, a fever chill that every physicist must fear. He's better dead than living still when once he's past his 30th year. So 30th was seen as like the cutoff. Like if you didn't achieve anything in science and mathematics by the time you were 30, then you were never going to achieve it. And I just think they viewed it as like an intellectual cap. And I think that's true. Your IQ does decline. Now, I don't think it's impossible to invent something or discover something, I guess, you know, past 30 in that world. But, you know, your odds and probabilities are going down. Now we're on chapter 39. Yo, oh my God, bro. I'm so much less enthusiastic than I was. I don't know if I need to eat for real or I need water than I was when I first started talking, but this is just a lot of talking, bro. Like when I first talked, when I was at fucking Winter Park, bro, it was only 8 chapters, bro. I'm eating a burger. I got fruit punch. The vibes is up, like the vibes is high. I got niggas around me and shit, bitches walking, you know what I'm saying? So of course I'm finna go crazy. But now my ass is just like in the sun. It's like fuck, no water. All mystery banished, for accessible, for distant. Newton, although a genius, would view his discoveries in the same magnitude as finding a pretty shell on the beach. Questions such as why was the sun as big as it was, or why did God choose to create something rather than nothing, to him could never be answered. He believed that the translation of God's creation can be found at limit, while some information closed off the same way a blind man cannot grasp color. Leibniz or Leibniz, however, accepted no such bounds. He thought that it was possible to know everything, and the universe had to make perfect sense since it was created by an infinitely rational God. Now we got to remember that this is like foreshadowing towards the relationship between Newton and Gottfried Leibniz. For Leibniz, even though they both were biblical men, I feel as if like Newton here is still leaving space for God in certain questions. But why? But like for Leibniz, if he believed that the world was rational in the sense that you could understand it a mere human, then I feel like Leibniz was the one who was mostly pushing out the existence of God. And in later chapters, what I just said will become flipped. But I mean, based on right here, bro, or this specific excerpt of the book, yeah, no, I feel like Leibniz is pushing out God or Gottfried. All right, chapter 40, talking dogs and unsuspected powers. Leibniz. I think I might end this recording early, bro, because this is like, oh my God, this is like the key points of the book, but I'm just like, Apple and the Moon. All right, I just gotta keep going, bro. I gotta tee up. I only have 13 chapters left I gotta talk about, okay? And then that's it. Chapter 40, talking dogs and unsuspected powers, Leibniz. Mine was always racing. Okay, so now we're learning about Gottfried, which was, damn, I feel like, I think I talked about this in the first 8 chapters, but when they introduce him, remember this dude is like, he's deemed as someone who has the knowledge base of an academy within himself, you know? So put some respect on my boy name, man. That's basically all I gotta say when I talk about him. But mine was always racing and often dove into many forms of literature simultaneously. Didn't publish his work of calculus for 9 years, discovered binary language, predicted machines of reason using this language, basically computers. The theory came before Ben Franklin's breakthrough on electricity. So basically chapter 40 is basically, goddamn, I said basically twice. Chapter 40 goes to show that even though Newton is starting to overtake him in mental prowess and in figure and in reputation during this time, he still is pretty monstrous when it comes to being just a virtuoso in general. Because I mean here it talks about too, like he predicted computers. Like he's still just like he's still should be acknowledged, bro. The basically the society we live in today, in a sense, like the root of what it was. So yeah, no, I mean this basically chapter 40 just goes a little bit into the background of Gottfried. Bro, what the hell? I be hearing all these strange ass noises, bro. They do be having foxes and like coyotes and shit around here. I think just coyotes more specifically. I don't know the difference between a fox and a coyote, to be honest with you. I haven't read too many books on animals, I'm not gonna lie. Unless it's dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are sharks. Mako shark, you know, the fastest shark in the ocean. You got, you know, the hammerhead, you have the great hammerhead, you have the white tip reef shark, you have the tiger shark, you know, you have the bull shark. Bull sharks are pretty aggressive, they could live in shallow waters as well. Tiger sharks like to hunt at night. You have the basking shark, which is one of the bigger sharks, but they're pretty, not scary and pretty. They're a lot of the times in cold water. Then you have the whale shark. I think the whale shark is the biggest shark, right? Besides the megalodon, if the megalodon is said to exist. Yeah, and then dinosaurs, T-Rex, Stegosaurus, Triceratops, Brachiosaurus. You have obviously the raptor. I think I know more about sharks, I guess you could say, than dinosaurs, but as a kid I was more interested in dinosaurs. Or started off with the first interest as dinosaurs. And then I remember reading books and, it would talk about the quote-unquote size ranges of what it was believed to be the dinosaur size. Like, I would describe like height, weight, and then the weight within metric tons, as well as just, I guess, tons. I don't know why the book did that, but I remember too that me reading books about dinosaurs and then them using that label pretty often led to me being in class, and then the teacher was just having us use or I guess raise our hand and talk about a new. Well, we're talking about, I guess, units of measurement, and some people would say inches, and then other people would say feet, other people would say pounds, and we're just labeling stuff out. And then, my smart ass, was like, metric ton. The bitch was like, what the fuck are you talking about? She was like, what the hell are you talking about? Metric ton? That doesn't exist. But good try, though, dumbass bitch. And then I remember, too, one of the girls that sat next to me, I don't know if you remember, or any of you guys who are in the U.S. remember, but on the back of like a composite journal, you would have like you would have labels, right? You would have, not labels, you have units of measurements in the back. You would have conversions. Sometimes it would be like customary conversions, symmetric conversions. And on one of the, I guess, conversions in the back, I guess this girl was like using that list to raise her hand and like name new stuff that people weren't naming, right? And then on that list was metric ton. And she would like, and when the teacher said that it wasn't a thing, I knew it was a thing, but I didn't have enough information to debate about whether it existed. So then I was just like, I just kind of like just put my hand down and just like brush it off. So it's like, I guess whatever. But the girl was like, look. She was pointing. She tapped me. And she was pointing at me. And she was like, yo, like it exists. Like it's real. Like look, it's on the journal. You gotta tell her. And then I just shrugged it off, and I just told her to like just shush, and then just like never raise my hand again. Not because I didn't tell her to just like I didn't tell her to not say anything to the teacher because I didn't believe that it was real, but more so because I was aware enough to understand my position in the classroom. And I understood that adults had more power when it came to what kids believe or what was deemed as true. And even though I would, I could have the evidence based on the girl's notebook to support my statement of, my unit of measurement. I didn't feel like going through the hassle. I think in my head, that's pretty impressive, I guess you could say, to be aware of my surroundings at such a young age. I think this was in like kindergarten or in first grade. But to understand when to testify and not testify is just a good skill. It's just being aware in general. That was a pretty big tangent, but dove into many forms. Okay, so we're on chapter 41. The world is close up to see. All right, the world is close up to see curves and straights. The problem with Galileo's graph representation of the rate of speed of a rock fall was that a rate was in the form of a parabola. To find the instantaneous speed of the rock, Leibniz and Newton used straight lines in the smallest of intervals to draw nearer towards 0 second instant speed, thus giving birth to the tangent line, the philosopher's stone that turned everything it touched into gold. Remember that Descartes dude who made the graph? Because of the invention of the graph, we could now measure speed by using imaginary straight lines of what speed could be based on time intervals. They use a straight line, and then they would say that, okay, this interval represented, what the speed was for 1 second, and then you would just cut that line down. If the parabola was like this and the line was straight, you would cut the parabola so close to the shortest interval that it would be non-existent, which created, I guess, the use of a tangent line. So that kind of goes, well, that's what chapter 41 goes into. And then chapter 42, we have when the cable snaps. So when the cable snaps on the elevator, acceleration hook. So chapter 42, bro, I think I'm just getting tired, bro. I've been talking for like 2 hours, bro. I know I have. It's 4:40, bro. Chapter 43, the best of all possible feuds, the debate over who discovered calculus first. Okay, so both Newton and Leibniz would talk to each other in caution through letters while simultaneously talking shit behind each other's backs to other colleagues. Both would later find positions in government, with Newton taking reign as the star of the town. Leibniz, through a series of events and networking, found his way into London, where both virtuosos would meet. The bitterness only... during that time, basically, it was just a growing bitterness. Remember I told you the foreshadowing of Isaac Newton discovering calculus before. So the bitterness kind of grew when Newton kept his, papers just enclosed. And, Newton's personality he was just not a social person. So he didn't always feel like he had to put his discoveries out to the public. And the only reason he would start posting his paper or his research papers into the Principia or whatever it's called later on was because another young virtuoso later in Newton's life kind of questioned him about certain things and urged him. His name was like Halley. I think that's how you pronounce it, Halley. And Halley something. I forgot his first name. I didn't even look at my notes, so I don't even know if that's his name. But he was a charismatic guy from what the book stated, and he would ask Newton about certain things, and he was like, "Yo, like you got to put this out there," essentially, basically in a simplified sense. And Newton gave in. It wasn't because like Halley like forced him. It was like, "Yo, I need this. Like, come on." Like Halley was just like he did like follow up, a couple times, but Newton just like it was one of those times where like your parents always say no. Like Newton just decided to say yes this day. But yeah, so that was kind of like okay. And the reason why there grew bitterness was because Leibniz or Gottfried was he published his, even though he also held his work for 9 years about calculus, which was weird. And there's so much more you're going to learn about Gottfried. Well, not a lot, but like certain things that I think as to why he kept his papers for 9 years. But he quote unquote held his research about calculus to himself for 9 years, and then when he finally published it, people were like, "Yo, this is crazy. This is yada 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 yada," and it wasn't until later when Newton would start to post his research or his theory and concept of gravity that within his book he would use calculus as one of his supporting supporting beams to the concept, and within his use of calculus he would use the methods that he used within or that he created within his miracle years, and then along with other methods and then combinations of whatever things that he created. And then he did it in a sense where he wouldn't say that this was this and this meant that. He showed the world that he technically knew about, he knew more about calculus than the creator of calculus deemed to know. So that was Newton's get back later on. I kind of spoiled you, but it is what it is. This is not what the video is about technically. I doesn't really hurt either. It's not like I'm presenting to you a movie. I'm just giving you information about a time of virtuosos. So chapter 44, Battle's End, mathematicians take it to heart. After years of discontent, Leibniz would go to the Royal Society and ask them to finish his quarrel. Upon review, it was found that Leibniz was not favored in the case. Leibniz. Newton had documentation proving he had discovered calculus first. He also had a record of Leibniz gaining access to his notes regarding calculus through a third party. The masses adopted Leibniz. Although that was the case, the masses still adopted Leibniz's work on calculus. I'll get back to that in a second, but to go backwards, it was found that Gottfried had basically, snooped in on Newton's papers. And this goes all the way back to when I was first talking about, in the beginning of the book, why I thought virtuosos encoded their work to protect it, like as some sort of two-factor authentication. And now, 50 chapters later, here we go. We have people stealing his work and then claiming it to be their own and publicizing about it and gaining recognition that they shouldn't have really got because they stole another person's work. And he didn't credit Newton at all. And I feel like maybe that's one of the reasons he held on to his work for 9 years. And, it was questioned in the book as well, another virtuoso was like, why would he hold, like, that wasn't his personality. He would be the type of dude to post it, especially when it came to status and how he talked shit about Newton behind his back. Like, it was as if, like he would have, like, if you have a boy who knows to flex, or like, okay, if you have a boy who knows, well, if you have a boy who likes to flex, and he buys a fucking Bugatti, and he doesn't post that shit on Instagram when he posts his gym post a year ago, about lifting like 30-pound weights at Planet Fitness, you would be like, what the hell? Like, that's not him. And in this sense, it's because the Bugatti really wasn't his. when he first got it, and he can only then post about it 9 years later when he really owned it.